In this video, I'm going to share some cool tips that will show you very quickly how to get started with looping and how to have lots of fun looping. Using a loop pedal, I think, is one of the fastest ways that you can improve as a guitarist, especially in terms of lead guitar. It's lots of fun, and it's a really fun and fast way that you can iterate and that you can get immediate feedback and you can try ideas and see if they work. It's a really brilliant tool. I can't imagine not using a loop pedal. I didn't have one for years, and I really wish I'd got one sooner because they're just brilliant bits of kit. They enable so many new ways of playing, but just purely from the point of view of, like, never mind being on stage performing with one, just being a guitarist who just plays the guitar at home by yourself, a loop pedal I think is still an essential tool. I think that's who it's best for, because it allows you to basically make a band. You know, it allows you to duplicate you. You can build out songs, and all of a sudden, instead of being one person with a guitar, you are a composer. You are basically composing. I always say it's like going from composing in 2D to 3D. When you're playing by yourself, that's one thing. When there's unlimited use, you know, then all of a sudden you can be a lead guitarist, a rhythm guitarist. You can also be a drummer and a bass guitarist and a vocalist and many other things. We're going to run through that. We're going to run through some of that in this video. It's a really big world, the world of looping. What I want to do in this video is just really condense it down and give you some simple tips for how you can get started. So without further ado, let's begin. All right, first of all, when we loop, how do we connect up our looper? So, like, super quick, 30 seconds. This is how loopers actually work for anybody who's new to this concept. Right, forgive my rubbish drawing. I'm not very good at drawing. I'm going to draw a guitar here, and this is going to be a Flying V guitar, because I'm not very good at drawing guitars very quickly. You run a guitar lead out of your guitar into a loop pedal. This isn't to scale, as you may have realized. And then the loop pedal then plugs into your guitar amplifier. Yeah. So we have our guitar here, we have our loop pedal here, and then we have our amp here. That's broadly how it works. But of course, if you want to, you could also run that into a pair of headphones. You don't have to use an amp. Or if you want to, you could also run that into a laptop if you wanted to. Yeah, you could run that into a DAW or whatever you want. But basically the concept is you use your electric guitar, you plug that into the loop pedal, and then you plug the loop pedal into something, yeah, whatever it will be. If you've got a whole, you know, like array of different guitar pedals, then where the looper should sit is at the end of your effects chain. So let's say you have like a distortion pedal, a reverb pedal, I don't know, you know, whatever else you've got, a compressor, whatever it might be. Then in that scenario, the guitar would go into here, and then at the very, very end of that chain, they would go into your loop pedal and go onwards from there. Okay, so that's how you connect up a loop pedal. Once it's in place, what do we need to think about? Well, very, very simply, the best way I think to think about this, the best way that I like people to begin building loops is basically to think of it as like a band. There's different roles within a band. There's loads of different ways, almost unlimited ways that you can approach this from the point of view of using a pedal. I think the best structure is to approach this to begin with chords. I think that's the best way for guitarists to begin. So if you're going to play a loop, begin with a chord progression. Yeah, so a chord progression I was kicking around when I was playing this morning was E, D, A to E. And to make this even simpler, I'll just try and play it with open chords so it's very easy for anybody to follow. All right, so here goes my chord progression. Okay, so that's my chord progression. It's kind of an upbeat sort of, you know, kind of rock sort of tone. You know, it's kind of driving, poppy sort of progression. I've just recorded it as I played it there, so let's hear that back. All right, so now when I'm listening back to that, I'm thinking about what I can lay over the top of it. I've recorded it with the looper. Let's see how the change goes. Okay, so it wasn't the cleanest transition in the world, but it's okay. For the purposes of demonstration, it's absolutely fine. What the loop pedal does is it records what you played and it plays it back to you. And you can add layers over that almost to infinity, you know, depending on what loop pedal you're using. So over the top of that, what I need now, if I think about how I prefer to approach these things, is number one, I like to start with my chords. So I like to begin with chord progression. The chords that we just used in that progression were E to D to A, and then we went back to E. Now usually I would have played those chords as bar chords. I would have played them something like this, because you have more control over bar chords. You're in contact with the strings. You can do more percussive elements. But because I want this to be easy for somebody who can't play bar chords to follow, I chose to play them in as open chords. It gives you a bit less control. It's more open notes. You can't always control the rhythm as precisely as you can when you use bar chords. Okay, so we're going to begin with chords, and we've got our chords. Great. So that's step one in us building our loop. We've got our chords and we've recorded them. Step two, what I like people to do next is percussion. All right. Now, when you think of percussion, you probably think of drums, and that's fine. But when we're playing on the guitar, we don't have a drum kit around. We might be able to use a drum machine. That's absolutely fine. I love drum machines. I use them all the time. Yeah, I've got all kinds of drum stuff set up over here. But I want this to be a guitar-only loop, because you may not have a drum machine at home. All right. What percussive sounds can we make with our guitar? Loads, absolutely loads. Think of your guitar as a percussive instrument, and you will start perceiving what you can do with it completely differently. So for example, we just played our loop there. Now on the guitar, you've got your pickups. We've got a neck pickup. We've got a bridge pickup. If I tap the guitar there, yeah, I can make a percussive tone. If I tap it here on the bridge pickup, it's slightly different. And if I go back here near to the bridge, so I've got different tones I can use. And we can use them to add percussive elements. We can also deaden strings. So I'm just going to touch the strings, but I'm not going to fret them. And then I can pick. Hear that? Let's put that over the loop that we were just listening to. Now, whenever you listen back to a loop, I always like to play it around once before I head over it, just to get a practice. Alright, so I've added that to the loop. Okay, so just so it's super clear to you what I was playing there, I was just deadening the strings, and then I was just almost randomly picking notes here. But you could just as easily just pick one note. You know, there's so many different ways that you can create drum beats using your guitar. Broadly, it's useful to think of it as your bass ear notes are here. Yeah, and then your more trebly notes are down here. But as you lay them over, that sounds kind of nasty by themselves, but as you lay it over and it sits there in a mix, then it creates some percussive elements. Let's listen back to that. You can hear that? We've got some sort of fake drums in there, haven't we? If that's too awkward for people to play, maybe people that can't finger pick or don't have that mobility, or just feel that's too hard, then make it way simpler. Just deaden the strings and just hit them with the pick. That's a big chunky sound that we've got there. You know, there's absolutely lots of percussive elements that we can add just using the different parts of our guitar. Please explore that. Start using your guitar in that way. Pick slides, yeah? Turn the pick towards the guitar string at a 90-degree angle and drag it down. Yeah? You can apply the pick in different places to get lots and lots of different tones. All of these things add texture to the loop. Some of them sound dreadful by themselves, but when they're in a mix, it's okay, because you're never hearing them played alone. You're never hearing them by themselves. They're all adding different elements. layers. When you're using a loop pedal, you have to think in layers. You're a composer now. You know, less is often more. Each layer can be very subtle. We've done quite a lot on those first two layers. Some layers can be really subtle. Okay, so we've added some chords, we've added some percussion. What comes next? Now, I like to add bass as my next layer on the loops that I use. Now, I could use a bass guitar. I've got one right there, but I'm not going to use that. I could use an octave pedal, which I've got plugged in here to my pedal board, which allows me to basically simulate having a bass in my hands here, even though it's not a bass. Yeah. So this is a normal guitar, but it sounds like a bass because I've got my octave pedal on. If you don't have a bass guitar and you don't have an octave pedal and you don't have a computer that you can, a laptop, you know, with a DAW that you could plug into and use a bass simulator, all right, or an octave pedal on your in Logic or GarageBand or something like that, then you can just play the root notes of the progression. That's absolutely fine. The chord progression that we played was E, D, and then we went to E, D, A, D, A, and then back to E. Okay, so if we want to, we can just play the root notes, which are E, D, A, E. And that's fine. It's not ideal. Of course, it's better to have that really, really low end. But if you don't have access to a bass guitar or an octave pedal or any of the other things I just said, then you can just use the root notes that you have available to you. That's absolutely fine. You're just emphasizing the low end of what you've played. Let's give that a try. Again, I'm just going to listen to it round once. Maybe I'm going to practice what I'm going to play. Alright, I've got a feel for it now. Alright, and now my bass is on now. Can you hear that in there? Okay, I've got a little bit more bass. If you can't hear that, if you're listening on like phone speakers or something like that, you may not be able to hear that. But there is more of a bass element in there. Let's put the octave pedal on and let's add in some deeper bass so you can hear how that would sound. Right, octave pedal is on. Let's give that a try. I'm going to play the same notes as last time, but now I've got the octave pedal on. It's going to sound different. I'm going to hear more low end. One, two, three, four. Alright, so now we've got a low end. You hear that? Sounds a bit more like an actual song now to me. Okay, so very, very quickly we've added some chords, we've added some percussive elements, we've added some bass. Okay, next I like to add some lead. Or, if you prefer, you can just think of this as melody. So on top of that, what I'm talking about there is you may want to add, the melody could be from a vocal, you could be singing, it could be anything. But generally when we have a guitar in our hands, generally when I'm thinking about melody, I'm thinking about lead guitar. So let's think about this. If we're going to play some lead guitar, what do we need to know? There's two things we need to do. Number one, we need to understand the musical situation. Number two, we play something complementary. That's all lead guitar is. Number one, understand the musical situation. Number two, play something complementary. All right, to understand the musical situation, what do we need? We need to know what are the chords, what's the key, what's the mood. That's it. Yeah, that is how we understand the musical situation. Chords, key, mood. Well, we already know the chords. I've explained them already, haven't I? The chords are E to D to A to E. Okay, now this particular track, I'm going to choose to play in E over this because it begins with E. Now that's not always the case, and actually in a lot of the time you will find that the tonal center of a song can move around, but for this particular track I'm going to play in E minor. Okay, so the song began in the key of E. So we started off here with an E chord. All right, now that doesn't mean that will always be the key, but in this example that's what I'm going to play with, and I'm going to play notes from a scale that matches the key. So if we go back to our two-step process for lead guitar, which is number 1, understand the musical situation, number 2, play something complementary, then I can either play notes from the chords, yeah, which will match that. I can play a scale that matches the key, and I'm going to try and match the mood with my own interpretation. So I know that if I'm going to play lead guitar, any of the notes from these chords are going to work well. But because I'm lazy and I want to keep things simple, I'm going to just choose this option here. I'm going to play a scale that matches the key. It's a sort of bluesy, rocky progression, so it's fine for me to make it minor. So the song begins in E. I'm going to play notes from the E minor scale. Let's see how that sounds. I'm going to play it around once just to get a feel for it. Alright, so I've recorded the loop. Let's listen back to it. Can you hear the different elements that are in there? It's a little bit too busy, this loop, I think, because that first guitar track that I put down was a bit too leery. It's taken up a bit too much room in the loop. But just for a quick and dirty demonstration of a loop, I think it's okay. You can hear the different elements that are in there. See if you can pick them out now. Just listen carefully. Sometimes you've got to really use your ears and develop your musical ear. It's an important skill to have, and it's a much overlooked skill. Let's see if you can unpick those 4 layers that are in there. Yeah, we can hear on the loop that we've got 4 layers. We've added them all. We've got our chords, we've got some very simple rudimentary percussion, very basic bass, and just a few notes from a scale that matches the key. So let's listen to that and see if you can hear them in there. That was a super quick demonstration of how we can quickly build up a loop. Now, of course, for each one of those different layers that we put in there, there's so many options. There really is. There's so many options. When it comes to chords and how you voice them, when it comes to the percussive elements that you can add, how you want to add bass elements, what lead guitar or melodies you want to add, but also other things like just tones that you may want to add, backing vocals, ambient sounds. That was a really busy loop, you know, but you can make them super, super chilled. And generally, I think one of the best tips I can give you for building loops is to think less is more. On each layer, you don't really want much going on because you want to leave plenty of space for the future layers that are going to come on there. That loop we did there was quite busy, but in general, you want to keep each layer kind of sparse and just make sure that on each layer you're making valuable contributions, but they can be very small. But of course, they add up into something, you know, much greater than the sum of the parts, you know, which is all part of the beauty of using a loop pedal. One last tip I want to share with you before we wrap this up, and that is I want to show you how to cleanly punch in and out of your loops, which is something that a lot of people really struggle with. In fact, it's the number one thing that when someone gets a loop pedal that they struggle with is, you know, starting and finishing the loops cleanly, kind of getting in and out in a clean way so that they don't like ruin the loop or have to undo what they've already done. So a cool way to think about this is to just picture it this way. So if we imagine that an example, you know, like a typical loop, you know, let's say it begins here. I'm going to try and draw like a really rubbish freehand circle here, but you can see what I mean. let's say that's the first loop that you lay down, okay? Now I call that the foundation loop. And that is the loop that defines, sorry for my rubbish drawing, but that is the loop that defines the duration of the loop, the foundation. It's not the same on every loop pedal, but certainly on most of the basic ones that I've used, that's how it works. There's a foundation loop that you put down at the start. And then that one, you know, defines the beginning and the end of the loop. But when you do the next loop after that, let's say you just wanted to add a bit of lead guitar that was going to come in here. Well, then you don't need to start and stop the loop here at the start. You don't need that. You can just punch in like here. Record the bit that you wanted to record there and then punch out there. Now I know that might seem like old news to anybody who's used to looping, but for a lot of beginners, they just don't realize that you don't need to complete the loop every time, because then it gets really, really hard to like match the perfect timing, you know, of like if you're going to go around the whole loop again and like stop at the exact moment here, you know, the precise moment, that, you know, that makes it quite hard to do. That's not the case. Unless you need to be playing right from the start right till the end of the loop, then you don't need to worry about that. And also another point to point out is that as you go around the loop, I always like to, when I get to the end, if I'm playing something that is going to fill the loop, then I will actually go around on my second loop. I'll go around like this and I'll actually overshoot the loop and I'll stop just before that. So like I'll come around like this, but I'll go past it and I'll finish it here. And the reason for that is, you know, I'll carry on playing if needs be, because I can do that, because the foundation loop will define the duration of the loop. On the next one, if you overshoot the loop a little, sometimes that's better, almost all the time that's better, because where you exit won't compete with the foundation loop, and sometimes you get some weird moments there. But also by beginning to play the next, you know, whatever would be occurring on the next time around on the loop, then that ensures that things blend together really, really well. So it's a really nice way to sort of stitch the loops together and make them overlap in a way that's seamless. So if they don't all have the same start and stop point, you know, then great, that's good, because that's going to make it blend better as well. But if you also play what would be on the next loop around and then exit, you know, after the start, then you've blended it in even more. Okay, and the last point I wanted to share with you here is when you're trying to come in to your loops in time, some people try to plan ahead by sort of pressing before they need to come in, or they want to give themselves like, you know, a couple of bars to sort of get started or whatever. And I find that a really awkward way to do loops, and it's also quite unreliable. I think the best way to come in is to press the pedal of the loop pedal at the exact moment that you make the first contact with the guitar, and back yourself and your timing to get it right. So it's like, this is my foot here, this is my guitar strum in hand, like that. You know, like they both happen at the same time. The pedal gets pressed and the guitar gets strummed at the exact same moment. And then the same at the end. You do the same thing if it's a foundation layer. There's loads of different ways that you can punch in and punch out of loops, but that way is the one that I've found to be the most reliable over time, where, you know, you always mess up some loops. Like I've been doing this for years and years, and I still mess up the loops, you know, the entry and exit points sometimes. You don't always punch in perfectly. That's fine. But as long as it's like 1 in 20 times, you can live with that. But when you're first beginning to learn to loop, you know, it's like you're messing them up quite a lot at the start. But honestly, that simple tip of just like matching the loop pedal to your strum and really backing yourself, you know, be bold, be confident when you press the pedal, don't be timid. I've just found that works better. You just come in strongly and you leave strongly, and you'll get more right than you'll get wrong if you do it that way. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a super quick, you know, tour of you know, the very, very basics of looping, how to use a loop pedal, how to build up a loop quickly using that framework I described. Number 1, chords. Number 2, percussive elements, whatever they may be for you. Number 3, adding some bass, some low end. Number 4, adding some lead or some melody on the top of that. Now listen, we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible using a loop pedal in this video. This is really just a quick, you know, introductory, you know, overview of a simple framework that works really well. There's so much more that you can do with looping. It's unbelievable the amount of options that are available to you. Things like, you know, ambient soundscapes, different tones you can create, vocals using microphones, so you can basically put any sound that you want into the loop. Tambourines, you know, shakers, hand claps, finger clicks, literally any sound you can think of you can use on a loop. And like I say, we've barely touched the surface of that today. We've got a brand new course coming very soon called Loop Secrets, where we're going to dive into this in way more detail. Really proud of the course. We've all been working hard on it for the last few weeks as a team. It's super cool. It will basically show you how to get started from scratch to the point where you're doing, you know, professional quality loops. And the whole course takes about 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm not actually sure, but I need to double check how long it is. I think the final edited version is probably going to be about 2.5 to 3 hours. So if that sounds like fun to you, if you want to learn, you know, basically go from 0 to like 100, you know, learn how to make professional sound and loops in just a couple of hours, then watch out for this course, Loop Secrets. It's coming really soon. The other point I wanted to make is, regardless of whether you get our course or not, please get a loop pedal, because I think it is the single best tool for improving as a guitarist and a songwriter. I can't think of anything else that you can buy for such a relatively low price that will have a bigger impact on you as a musician and accelerate your progress more than a loop pedal. Honestly, they're the absolute business. Please get one, check them out, they're so much fun. If you're interested in Loop Secrets, stay tuned. I'll send you some more information soon, as long as you're on our email list. I hope you've enjoyed this free introduction to the world of looping. It's lots of fun. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch up with you soon.